Okay, my name, for those of you who don't know, I'm Ron Seaman. A little bit about my background is when I was 15 years old, I started developing computer software, and at age 22, I retired because I developed a computerized car, the first car that ever had a navigation system in it. It used a cellular positioning system, and that was before GPS was available. That was used by the military, but the military wanted something. With GPS, when you drive in a building, it shuts off, but your cells don't shut off, so people know where you are. Anyway, so in 1984, I sold that, and that car was never on the roads ever again. That was 22 years before Google came out with it. But anyway, so throughout my life then I developed computer software and consulting, and I did ministry stuff, and so now I'm in a position where I'm going to be able to fund worldwide missions due to a plethora of patents related to cars. But what I'm going to do is take you through something, and everybody's very, very weak in this. Churches need to teach this at a very young age. And what happens by the time you get to 5th grade and you hear a science teacher, you believe in evolution because everyone tells you that it's true. And it's scientifically impossible, and I'll show you why. And even Charles Darwin from his grave agrees with me, and it's in his book. And I'll show you when we go through that. So when you look at the Bible, I mean, I've debated with people all the time, atheists. Go on to, I think the Facebook page is called The Thinking Atheist. And you'll just be hammered and hammered and hammered by these people, and they don't know the facts. And they will do things. So the way I know they don't know the facts is I have a Facebook profile called John Smythe, and he's an atheist. And this John Smythe works at Apple Computers. And I happen to know all about Apple, so if anyone sends me questions, I can answer them, so they really think I'm John Smythe. So I'll go on there as an atheist onto their Facebook pages or to other social media, and I will say to them, you know, I have this Christian friend, and he brings up this point, and I need an answer for this point. And I don't want to seem like a dummy, and I don't want to misrepresent atheists. So how can I answer them? So then they'll write all this stuff. Then I'll go and study it. Then I'll come back as myself, and I'll be prepared. But we need to be able to defend our faith at all times. And the Bible even says that. And so, how do you know the Bible is the Word of God? Well, I have a ministry to Muslims, and I go to Washington, New York, Detroit area, Chicago, and Muslims, I don't know, does anyone know what the Muslims believe about Jesus?
I believe he was a prophet, right?
Mm-hmm. He was a prophet, no better than Moses, no better than Muhammad, no better than any prophet. And what else? Anything else? Well, I'll tell you what they believe. They believe that Allah would never let Jesus die. Allah would never punish a prophet like that. Well, first of all, they're clueless because prophets are nothing but punished throughout the Old and New Testament. You're hurt when you're told the truth. I mean, when you speak the truth. And one of the benchmarks in the Old Testament is if you didn't speak the truth, you would be executed. And that's why when Jesus came in the New Testament, he came and they said, he's saying like he's God, and he said, I am, and they know that when Moses was by the bush, the bush spoke out and said, you know, I am. And so they thought Jesus was blasphemous. They tried to kill Jesus many ways. Did you know that? And Satan was so rooting for Jesus to die in a way other than crucifixion. They tried, do you know some of the ways they tried to kill Jesus?
Try to push him off a cliff.
Exactly, that's one. They tried to run him over with a Humvee in the desert. Did you read that? That's in that, no. Anyway.
I was like, what?
But there were many ways, and Satan wants to make Jesus or God a liar. And so what's so important is, so the Muslims will say, well, the Old Testament is corrupted. And I love when they say that. And I say, well, the Quran says that Allah will not allow his word to be corrupted. So, is Prophet Muhammad lying? Is Allah lying? Is, what's lying? And they say, well, the Old Testament's corrupted. And I said, great, okay. Well, I'm going to show you something that proves the Old Testament's not corrupted. And you know who found it? A young Arab boy. Jesus has such a sense of humor. He didn't have some Jewish boy come and find it. He didn't have a Christian come and find it. He had an Arab boy come and find it. And here's what happened. Well, by the way, what I'm talking about, you could teach a whole college class, so I'm just sort of cramming down as fast as I can, and if you want to ask questions anytime, just do that. But do you know what Yom Kippur is? Yom Kippur is the holiest day in anyone's calendar, Christian or Jewish. That is when they had the tabernacle set up, and the tabernacle had, and somewhere, I have the rest of the top of this, but this is the Ark of the Covenant, and that would be in the center, and there was this big tent, and I should have brought that next time I will. It's a very, very exacting instructions about Jesus. It's the perfect image of Jesus. So anyway, on Yom Kippur, the priest would take off his outer clothes. So he was wearing just white, and essentially that's like wearing underwear. So if Jay came out here with his smiley faced boxers, that's what the priest was like. And he did a sacrifice. He did a sacrifice for his sins. Do you know how many people were there during this? Everybody. In the wilderness, everybody was there. There's estimated to be 2 million people out there. So here he is, and he does a sacrifice for his sins to purify himself. And the definition of a priest is one who takes man's request and goes to God, and the definition of a prophet is one that takes God's words and brings them down to man. So, this high priest would do this ceremony. He'd kill some shed blood, and he would be forgiven. And then he would talk to the crowd, and he would say, there are people out here who have stolen, and there might be people dropping their head. And he said, there are people out here who have blasphemed God's name. And blaspheming God's name is not just saying some cuss word, that's minor. Blaspheming is taking and saying, like, God, I want you to do this, I want you to do it right now. It's like taking his name in vain. It's like, hey man, I'm a Christian, why am I in this situation? Why am I sick? Why don't I have a job? Why didn't I get this promotion? Why does my sister drive me nuts? Why this? Why that? That is taking God's name in vain. And but anyway, so he would do this whole talk to everybody, and then the most incredible thing, the most incredible illustration is they would bring a goat out, and they would kill one goat to shed the blood for everyone's sins. And then they would have a volunteer, and this volunteer would come, and they would take the goat, and everybody would watch him as he walked until they could see him no more. And that was taking the sins away, and that's where they got the term scapegoat, as he said. And so that, now why did I say goat? There was lambs and there were goats, and lambs were considered more pure. Goats were not considered like as great animals. So what happened was, back to this 1947, there's an Arab boy with a bunch of goats, and he is looking for one of the goats. Rumor has it was named Dom or something. So he's looking for Dom, Dom, and he's looking and looking and looking, and you know, he's just running. God has such a great sense of humor, and what happened in the year, roughly around the year 60 AD, 30 years after Jesus died, Jerusalem was destroyed, and so Jews fled with all kinds of stuff, and they hid this stuff, and they hid all kinds of scrolls. And where did they store them? At the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is the lowest place on earth, and it was on the lowest place on earth where the greatest discovery in the history of the universe was ever done from an archaeological standpoint. So this boy was taking stones, and he was throwing them in the cave, and he heard a sound like that, and he said, "What's that?" And he goes in there, and he sees these, which here's real photographs. This is from the Dead Sea Scroll exhibit at the Library of Congress. They had a big exhibit there, and then they had one in Chicago. This is the Dead Sea, and do you know why it's dead? Again, God made a perfect illustration. The Jordan River flows south into the Dead Sea, and the Dead Sea has no outlet. And so what happens is this salt gets in there, and the rocks cry out. It's exactly what we do. We take in, and never let anything out, and we are dead. Well, so that Dead Sea, and you can see there's the Sea of Galilee, and you know, that's where Jesus was on the boat, and this sea is really dynamic. You know, you can have great waves, and water flows from there through the River Jordan, where you get baptized, and the Dead Sea. So the density of the Dead Sea has so much salt. I have a photograph of sumo wrestlers going in there, and they just sit on the water and they float. And there's one other place like that on earth where you could do that. But anyway, the Dead Sea is the lowest place on the earth. I think it might be minus 400 feet below sea level. And it is perfect for storing because it's very dry. This condition here, this is looking outside of one of the caves. And so what did they find in these caves? They found fragments of every book in the Old Testament except the book of Esther. And the book of Esther is the only book that does not have the name God in it. But it has the hand of God in it. Every book in the Bible, there's a great preacher, and I didn't even know, he'd been dead for 10 years when I've been listening to him on the radio, and it's called Through the Bible Radio, and it takes 5 years, and he takes you through the whole Bible, and it's in 180 languages, and his name's J. Vernon McGee, and he was a pastor.
I love him.
Do you
Yeah,
love him?
I love him.
You should see his commentary. I mean, he is great. So J. Vernon McGee, if you want to get a college degree in theology, all you got to do is listen to him for 5 years. Or you can go on the internet and cram, and you can listen to it. It's recorded through the Bible. It's something like TB. So I went through that Bible bus a few times, and like that's why God had me drive to western suburbs to work. And when I finished the Bible tour, I was the first one to start telecommuting. And then I moved out to Chesterton. I used to live in Hawaii, and I worked in Oak Brook. And then the firm that I was consulting and working with, they moved farther by Naperville, and I moved farther to Chesterton. Anyway, there's a whole story about that. But they found all kinds of things, bowls, Little Caesar pizza tins, everything. And they dated, and here's some actual scrolls. They dated these scrolls, there's no question about it, they dated them 100 to 300 BC. So we know that we know that we know that we know that the Old Testament existed prior to Jesus coming. Do you know what the fifth gospel is? The book of Isaiah is considered the fifth gospel because there's so much information about Jesus in it. And they have multiple complete copies of the book of Isaiah. Well, anyway, this is Hebrew. Now, does anybody know how to read Hebrew? So picture this. This is 300 years before Jesus, so we have this. And then picture, okay, I need a volunteer. Okay, you could come. And I need you too. Or, Andrew? You don't want to have, okay. All right. Here you go. You can hold this. Now, this, this is ceremonial kind of stuff. You know, Jesus was in the temple, and he came in, and it was really cool. And this is made in Israel, and you could feel that, you know, not that that is special or anything, but that is the Ten Commandments, and this is the entire, what do you think is in here? What does the word penta mean? Pentagon, yep, and pentagon means 5 sides, and the Pentateuch is the first 5 books of the Bible, and they are Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, and that's what this is. Now, people complain about Bible studies. Oh, I got to, there has been I could do a talk for days on the history of the Bible, but I'm going to give this to you and you. Okay, now, that is what Jesus used. No punctuation, no chapterization, and it's serial. What I mean by that is, which way do you read Hebrew? From the right to the left. So if I say to you, show me the 10 Commandments in there, how many hours do you think it would take you to find the 10 Commandments? Whereas if I give you this turbocharged index Bible with cheating, all kinds of stuff on it, do you realize how we went from computers, reel-to-reel tapes, it was serial, and we went to disk drives, which are random access, and this is a random access, and this, okay, you hold that. This, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Okay, it's getting close to stopping.
Oh no,
the
Kevin's
video.
got more.
Okay, so, who can memorize this?
Whole thing?
Okay, now, you can just hold it tight, I'm going to roll it back up. So imagine these Dead Sea Scrolls, by the way, they were stored on many different things. They were stored on animal skin and some parchment stuff, but everybody in the world agrees they were dated 100 to 300 BC. And you know what else? They found things. Like people said, oh, the Romans weren't here at that time, blah, blah, blah. Well, they found Roman coins as they were excavating. Like, you know, if you're soldiers and you, like right now, if you go to Afghanistan, I'm sure you'll find iPods in the sand somewhere. And they'll know that the American Army with their Apple stuff.